In this TDL profile, we're talking to comedian Dan Nainan and his unusual voyage from Silicon Valley to the stage.
Well, in a nutshell, my job was to travel around the world with Andy Grove and Craig Barrett and Paul Otellini and the sort of the brain trust of Intel and do technical demos on stage with them. Was super nervous about speaking on stage. I mean, I could do the technical demos in my sleep. It was, that was the easy part. Tough part was speaking on stage. Always had an affinity for making people laugh, doing voices. Took a comedy class. To make a long story short, comedy just kind of took off at beginner's luck and decided to leave Intel and go and become a professional comedian.
And how long were you at Intel?
I was there for about 5 years.
Okay.
And yeah.
So you were running out of processor chip jokes at that point.
Well, what happened was I actually developed a very, like a spot-on impression of Andy Grove, who's one of the co-founders, and kind of became famous with the company for that. And they would use that voice like for conventions when they needed someone to do his voice and like a voiceover or something. So.
Now, so you were at Intel during the switch for Apple to go to the Intel chip. What was that like?
Well, it's so funny because traditionally, it's been a very Intel versus Apple. It's like, Arabs, Jews, or classical heavy metal, or, Hatfields and McCoys, or Tom and Jerry. I mean, it's just people at each other's throats. And then all of a sudden there was this kind of unification. And when Steve Jobs came to ISMC, which is the annual marketing conference, he was the surprise guest. And the place just went crazy. And they're like, what's he doing here? And then, of course, that presaged a couple years later that Intel came over to Apple, and Apple came to Intel, and it was amazing. It was the kind of thing that would bring tears to your eyes if you're a nerd.
So you appeared in an Apple ad. Tell us a little bit about that. When did that happen? How did that all come about?
Well, we shot that October 9th. When you're a comedian slash actor, you go out for a lot of these things, and sometimes you get callbacks. I got a callback for a Super Bowl commercial, but I didn't make it, and I was really bummed about that. So when I went to this audition, I thought, I have no chance. I mean, this is a national commercial. I mean, there's no way I'm going to make it. So I was very, very loose, and I was in a room, and we had four of us tied together by an electrical cord, and they said, okay, one of you, this is a 4-pack of really cheap computers, and one of you is going to keel over and die, and the other 3 of you are just supposed to sort of react to the other guy dying. And all I did was I just went like that, and and the director was staring at me. I don't know why he was staring at me. The next day I get a call from my agent. You got the shot, you got the commercial. I said, oh, cool. Okay, when's the callback? The second audition. He goes, there isn't one. You got it. I said, you're kidding. And we went in and shot on a Sunday. It was with Justin Long, Mac, and John Hodgman, PC, and myself, and a couple other guys. And, interestingly enough, John Hodgman is a lifelong Mac aficionado. It's very interesting. And it was very interesting. It was like a cult, on the set. Everyone's got an iPhone and a MacBook. You didn't see any non-Apple hardware anywhere in sight. And I have both, and I thought, man, I'm glad I didn't bring my Windows laptop here. And then it only took about an hour and a half to shoot it. The rest of the day you're just basically sitting around and eating and, kind of chatting with the other actors. And then I didn't know if it was going to be accepted because apparently Steve Jobs himself approves or disapproves of each commercial personally, which, as you imagine Steve would do, fingers in every pie, right? And I was over in India on tour, and then I heard from my sister an email. I'm lying by the pool, and she writes me, I just saw you on the NFL opener. I was like, oh my goodness, they actually accepted it, and they're showing it.
Did they have any knowledge of your background in the tech industry when you went in for the audition?
I don't think so. I mean, my agent's pretty familiar with my career and what I do comedy-wise, but I don't think so. I mean, the auditions for the casting director, and then the client looks at the auditions, and then they decide. So it's a process. The video goes through a lot of hands, and I thought I was thinking, man, first of all, John and Justin were very, very nice. They introduced themselves to us, and that's really kind of unusual. The stars are just, like usually it's like you're not supposed to talk to the stars or whatever. But they were very nice. I thought about kind of rapping with John and saying, hey, I'm a comedian, buddy, but I thought, you know what? I don't want to make any waves and open my mouth and say anything that might jeopardize me being in this commercial. So I just kept my mouth shut, and I don't know whether they knew I didn't hand my cards out or anything like I normally would, or network. I just said, so I want to shoot, I want to go home, and I hope that it gets taken, and it did. So
Apple's known, of course, for secrecy. Was there anything going into the shoot that was different than what you might expect on other commercial shoots?
what was really interesting is that at the initial audition, you had to sign 5 copies of an agreement saying you're not going to disclose this, you're not going to disclose that. And I've never seen that. Now, this is the initial audition, mind you, not callback. And then, of course, we had to make sure that all that paperwork was in order when we actually shot. But yeah, I mean, and you look at the agreement, and it's just incredible. Now, the other thing is I'm not allowed to do any other tech-related ads. I can't do Intel. I can't do, and I've had opportunities where my agent called and said, "Hey, can you do this Intel shoot?" And I said, "Nope, I've got a conflict because I'm with Apple. I can't do any kind of phone. I can't do any kind of music player," which is, that's normal for the business. But trust me, it's a great problem to have.
And switching gears a little bit, so you obviously you have a website, comediandan.com.
Right.
How do you use different online venues to promote yourself as a comedian?
Well, I'll tell you something. This is something that a lot of comedians just don't know how to do. The business side of things and the computer side of things, because comedians are mostly artists, or getting them to even wake up. A lot of my comedian friends get up at 5 p.m. and I'm thinking, how are you going to go on auditions, because they all take place during the business day, right? But it's infinite. I mean, there's things like creating the CDs and the DVDs that I sell. In fact, I've got a couple over here. This is the CD and this is the DVD, and I sell those after shows, and creating the master for those. That's something most comedians, they pay someone else to do, but of course you can just do it on your own computer. Uploading stuff to YouTube. One of my clips has over 650,000 hits as of today, and the other ones amount to the millions, and I'm not really that well known in the mainstream, and so it's kind of like a leveling of the playing field, and it kind of obviates the need to have a manager and so on and so forth. Making travel arrangements. Obviously, the internet's fantastic for that. Looking on, getting stuff on Priceline, getting cheap hotels, getting carrentals.com, TripAdvisor to check out every hotel before you book it. Flight Aware, when you're on the plane, you can see where the plane is, and I mean, it's infinite what you can do with the internet and show business. And anyone who isn't taking advantage of it is going to be at a tremendous competitive disadvantage.
What's the worst thing about being a comedian?
Well, I think the worst thing is there's a tremendous amount of negativity. It seems like the guys and girls who come out on stage are real happy-go-lucky people, but there's a real unfortunate underbelly to the comedy world, and you have a lot of bitter, angry people, and there are people who are reasonably successful who are still bitter and angry that they haven't gotten a sitcom yet. There's a tremendous amount of drug use, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of depression, and it just seems like 95% of comedians are like that. Now, I have some friends who are not like that, and those are the ones I hang out with. But by and large, it's almost stereotypical. It's like they're bitter, angry, chemically dependent. The typical comedian, honestly, is not someone whom I would want to hang out with.
Do you think you have a different perspective because you came from a different world when you came to comedy?
I think so, because obviously, working at Intel and so on, you had to get up early. I mean, you have to wake up at 7 like every working person. And that's a weird thing is comedy, I mean, this job takes place, we're performing for working people. So most of the time I'm going to be in bed by midnight at the latest, even if I'm on the road. And there's no need to get up or there's no need to stay awake rather until 7, 8, 9 in the morning, which a lot of these guys do. I don't understand it. So So having, to answer your question, being in the working world and having all that exposure to A, the business side, and B, the computer side has been really helpful.
Let's talk about your Mac experience. So you have a Mac Mini and an iPod. Which iPod do you have?
Oh, actually, I have it. Here it is. This is my little iPod Touch, which is just the most fantastic thing. My favorite thing about this is when you're on the road, like let's say going through an airport and then or any place, and you go, do they have Wi-Fi here? And then here you can just find it, and you don't have to open your computer up, right? It's so, I mean, and of course there's all the millions of applications. This is incredible. This thing. It's I live on this thing. It's amazing. Stocks, weather. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible when you're an artist and you're not, a household name. Just what the internet and what computers mean and what they provide. Anybody literally can record a song and then put it up on the internet, and then it can be, the potential audience is 1 billion people.
You can learn more about Dan at his website, comediandan.com. For thedigital lifestyle.tv, I'm Ryan Ritchie.